with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, October 19th, 2023. My name is Emma Vigeland in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Spencer Headworth, author of Rules of the Road, the Automobile, and the Transformation of American Criminal Justice. Meanwhile, more than 500 anti-Zionist peace protesters arrested in D.C. yesterday in demonstrations led by progressive Jewish groups. Amazing, brave people. I love them. Early forensics inconclusive about which side caused the hospital explosion that killed hundreds in Gaza. However, many of Israel's immediate claims about the facts, I should say, surrounding the blast have already been debunked, and Israel has bombed hospitals before. The death toll in Gaza now surpasses 3,800. Violence and protests escalate in the West Bank as well. And a senior State Department official resigns in protest over Biden's support for Israel's attack on Gaza. Also, as the Biden administration prepares to seek $100 billion in aid to Israel, along with $60 billion for Ukraine. Once Congress gets its crap together, or at least the Republican Party does, and we might be waiting on that for a while, because after losing the second speaker vote by more than he did in the first round, Jim Jordan's not seeking a third vote today. Womp womp. Republicans will try to give the temporary speaker, Patrick McHenry, more powers, working with Democrats potentially on that. Iowa GOP Congresswoman Mariannette Miller Meeks, that's a mouthful of a name, says that... What'd you say?
Triple M.
Triple M. She should go by MMM. Like AOC? Whatever. Says she received death threats for not supporting Jim Jordan. Sidney Powell takes a plea deal in the Georgia case. She'll plead guilty and avoid jail time, but will also have to testify against others like Trump. Flip the Kraken, baby. And Trump's request to delay the civil January 6th trial denied by a judge. Biden's set to pause efforts to collect money from PPP loan scammers. Jobless claims are at their lowest level since January. The labor market remains hot. And lastly, Cornel West gets a max donation from Clarence Thomas's infamous benefactor, Harlan Crow. That's not great. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome to the show, everybody. Hope you had a great hump day in my absence. I was supposedly a day of disconnection from the news for me, and I failed spectacularly at that.
Yeah, at the end of the show yesterday, I said, I'm sure Emma is probably scanning her phone right now, and I went on your Twitter profile and went to the likes tab, and you had about 8 from the past half hour.
I thought all of that was private. Why are you tracking me? It's honestly
a violation.
It's a total violation of my obsessive privacy. Or my privacy surrounding my obsessive nature, I should say. Yeah, I mean, I can't unplug from this. It's like that's the thing. I mean, we're all in this business, I think, because we care. It's definitely not for like the millions of dollars that people at the Daily Wire make. And I can't shut off caring, and I want to look straight in the face of these horrors and not back away and not put my hand in or put my head under this in the sand. And, I said this a few minutes ago in headlines, but I am so inspired by what I saw yesterday in Washington, D.C. We're going to play some clips of that here. There were mass protests, thousands, more than 5,000 Jewish Americans, according to Mondo Weiss, and others gathered at the National Mall, and Rashida Tlaib spoke, Cori Bush spoke, protesting, demanding a ceasefire, saying that this will be not in our name was one of the hashtags and slogans that these progressive Jewish groups were using to call for a ceasefire and say end to the massacres in Gaza. Here is Rashida Tlaib speaking at that rally, and just want to say I am in awe of her bravery, because it has been on the front lines of threats and accusations.
Yeah, you want to talk
by
about death
crazed
threats.
Republicans, exactly, and it's not going to stop. And yet she refuses to back down.
And her staff too. Also, the way that they interface with law enforcement, and they have to rely on things like the FBI to follow up on things like that.
Yep.
And there's a tremendous amount of bravery, not only by Rashida but everybody working on her staff.
Here she is.
I wish all the Palestinian people would see this. I wish they can see that not all of America want them to die. That they are not disposable. They have a right to live. They didn't ask to be born in occupation. And so I just want to thank you on the bottom of my heart. The dehumanization has chipped at my soul, and I can't imagine what it's made so many other people feel. So you all being here to speak truth, because the warmongers are out, y'all. They are ready. They want to kill and not stop. It's pure insanity. I still remember the cry of Maya, who's being dragged out of that festival, crying for her father. But just like poor Shama in Gaza, who is #1 in her scores. I don't know if you know anything about Palestinian culture, but it's a big deal that somebody from Gaza could score #1 on her. It's like the valedictorian for the whole Palestinian people. And both of them are victims. They're victims of the oppression, of the violence. They both deserve to live. I don't care what their faith is or their ethnicity. Maya didn't deserve to be targeted. Neither did Shaman deserve to die. And that's the common humanity that we all have to remember, because they're trying to take it away from us.
Yeah.
And we have to make sure it doesn't happen. Not on our watch. I'm going to be real with you all. My colleagues, many of them, I usually don't talk smack about them. No, I'm usually considerate, because I don't like them policing me, so I don't police them. But as an American, not just as a member of the United States Congress, I am ashamed. I am ashamed that they're saying, not yet, maybe next week. Not yet, Rashida. Maybe in a couple of days. How many more have to die?
That's the question. I mean, the death toll that we know, and it's got to be much higher. I mean, there are bodies under rubble. 3,800. And counting. How many will satisfy the bloodlust of the Israeli government? We're talking 5,000?
The answer they have is more.
10,000?
More.
20,000? What's the threshold for these members to call for a ceasefire? 5,000, 10,000, 20,000. How much blood? Is there some sort of, I don't know, leader amount? Not to be crass, but this is what we're talking about here. I wish that we had representatives that all had the bravery that Rashida Tlaib and the rest of the squad has. I mean, they've been pretty consistent on this. The 13 that signed that ceasefire resolution, including AOC, Jamal Bowman, Ayanna Pressley, Ilhan Omar.
I would say shout out to Greg Kassar because he has not been great on this issue, throwing BDS under the bus in the campaign, but I was not expecting him to sign on to that ceasefire, and I'm glad he did, and good on his staff for pushing him on that.
Exactly, especially because he signed previously in the days prior that we support Israel essentially unconditionally resolution. So this was a welcome about face from him on that front, or at least an attempt at kind of winning back some of that goodwill. But yes, it's just not enough. And let's play Naomi Klein here as well, who spoke, because as I mentioned, many of those protesters, I mean, this was organized by progressive Jewish groups like Jewish Voice for Peace and If Not Now. There were thousands of Jewish Americans saying this is not representative of what we want. We do not want this. We want a ceasefire. And it's important to elevate those voices because there are real forces in our politics and in the media that want to conflate Zionism with Judaism. And frankly, that is an anti-Semitic conception, because Jewish people are more than the more nationalistic impulses or expansionist impulses of the Israeli government. It's reductive at the very least,
it's
and
and
it's anti-Semitic at the other end.
It serves Israel's national interest.
And why, of course, then to that point, that's why you see someone like Ron DeSantis and the Republican Party engaging in it. Do you think that they've suddenly come to this issue in a way that's like egalitarian and not bigoted? Are you kidding me?
Right.
And the 24 rabbis that got arrested, they're standing firm in their morality. The other activists, the other Jewish activists that got arrested and protested as well, they understand that they're the ones who are being morally consistent on this front.
And the Israelis themselves who have to go into hiding, like the one journalist, for opposing the bombing of Gaza.
And Naomi Klein is another person who, I don't like to have a ton of heroes, but in this business, she's somebody that I look up to, especially as a woman. This is her speaking at those demonstrations yesterday.
I have never seen anything like this in my history of Jewish anti-Zionist activism. It's been decades. We used to be tiny. We are huge and growing. We have a sacred responsibility to engage with our parents, our grandparents, our uncles, our brothers and sisters, and try to save their souls, to keep them from indulging in this quest for bloody vengeance. We are here because we will not let our fears of anti-Semitism be manipulated in this way as cover for war crimes and colonial land grabs, and to foreclose on the possibility of a political solution, which will only come with an end to occupation, with an end to apartheid, with true Palestinian freedom and self-determination. We will not use the fact that many of our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents were refugees from genocide to justify making hundreds of thousands or even millions of new Palestinian refugees. These are not our leaders. Not in the Knesset with its so-called unity government, and not here in Congress, which reconvenes now in part in order to approve new money and new weapons to send to Israel for its genocidal attack on Palestinians.
Genocidal. I mean, she speaks with incredible clarity, as she always does. Some of the protesters, Washington Post reported that they were waving signs, "Our blood is the same color." My grief is not your weapon. Zionism is racism. Much of what Naomi Klein said right there. And the more and more that message gets out there, the more and more it's going to become untenable, hopefully, for the Biden administration to continue with this position. Because, frankly, I understand that he has to make some sort of... He has to promote Netanyahu in public in order to make certain pleas behind the scenes. And some reporting said from local Israeli papers that Biden was sitting in on the war planning meetings, which...
I better hope it doesn't go really poorly then, because it's going to look bad.
Well, it sounds horrible on its face, but it also, from Biden's perspective, is likely an effort to attempt to mitigate the most genocidal impulses of this Netanyahu government. Yeah, so we're getting to a point though where, I mean, Biden needs to. It's over trying to just do that soft power behind the scenes. He needs to come out strongly for a ceasefire and an end to the bloodshed, which is completely, obviously untenable. And before we head to our guests, I did want to play just some footage of the actual protests as well. These are some of the hundreds of pro-Palestinian demonstrators that are in the Cannon House building in Washington, D.C., chanting "Not in our name."
Hundreds of whom have been arrested, I believe, since then, right?
Yep. Amazing. Wonderful. And if you want to get involved, everybody should go to Jewish Voice for Peace, and if not now, because I know that this is not the end of their activism on this front.
And they're also under attack by ADL, and I've seen other people. I mean, obviously Ben Shapiro. So
yeah, it really is important to show solidarity with these demonstrators. And if you can, I would encourage you to get involved in local demonstrations in your area. Be careful. I know sometimes it's a little difficult because there have been reports that employers are watching people's social media activity on this front fairly carefully. So just make sure that you're in a place that you are okay with putting yourself out there like that. But even if you're not, there are ways to help behind the scenes and show solidarity to people, because I think there are a lot of folks that feel alone. I've spoken to Jewish friends behind the scenes who are afraid to say anything because of how their parents are going to react. One friend joked to me, I feel like I'm going to get written out of the family will based on what I say on this.
I mean, some of that's going to absolutely happen.
And Naomi Klein hit on it. There is a generational divide, I think. And there are young progressive Jews that don't want to be associated with an apartheid system, that don't want to be associated with a genocide that is ramping up at this moment. And those are the people that give me a lot of hope. And seeing that yesterday was the first moment of real, I would say, like a silver lining or some flicker of hope in the situation. So I can't thank everybody out there enough who put their bodies on the line and got arrested for this cause that could not be more important. With that said, we will get to our guests in a moment, but we have a word from one of our sponsors, and that sponsor is Stamps.com. Christmas, Hanukkah, it's coming up, other holidays, and the holiday rush means more mailing and shipping for your business. But it doesn't have to mean more stress. Stamps.com has been helping businesses like yours save time and money for 25 years, and it can help you get ready for the holiday ramp-up. All you need is Stamps.com's premium rates for all your postage needs. With Stamps.com, all you need is a computer and a printer. They even send you a free scale, so you'll have everything you need to get started. Now, taking care of orders on the go is even easier with Stamps.com and their mobile app. If you need a package pickup, you can easily schedule it through Stamps.com's dashboard. And if you sell products online, Stamps.com seamlessly connects with every major marketplace and shopping cart. Stamps.com also offers premium discounts and supplies at your fingertips. Running low? Order shipping and mailing supplies, labels, and even printers from the supply store. Get huge carrier discounts up to 84% off at off USPS and UPS rates to help your bottom line. Plus, Stamps.com automatically tells you your cheapest and fastest shipping options. For 25 years, Stamps.com has been indispensable for over 1 million businesses. Get access to the USPS and UPS services you need right from your computer, anytime, day or night. No lines, no traffic, no waiting. Sign up with promo code Majority Report, one word, for a special offer that includes a 4-week trial, plus free postage and a free digital scale. That's promo code Majority Report. No long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to Stamps.com, click the microphone at the top page, and enter code Majority Report. Stamps.com, click the microphone at the top page, and enter code Majority Report, one word. Thank you to Stamps.com for sponsoring this program. All right, quick break, and when we come back, we'll be speaking to Spencer Headworth. We are back, and we are joined now by Spencer Headworth, Associate Professor of Sociology at Purdue University, author of Rules of the Road, the Automobile and the Transformation of American Criminal Justice. Spencer, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be back.
So, yes, good to have you. Your book focuses on how the car completely transformed policing in this country. We've had guests like, Paris Marx on and others to speak about how the car has transformed, urban spaces, transformed the way that we structure our society physically. But I never thought about it really in the context of policing and criminal justice. I guess let's just start there with the overall thesis and findings of the book.
Sure. Yeah. The overall idea of the book is that to understand the development of American criminal justice over the 20th and the 21st centuries, we really need to reckon with the pivotal role that cars and driving have played in a number of key developments. The origination of the idea of police as these generalists that were going to have wide authority and wide discretion really hinged on the assignment of traffic duty to police in the early 20th century. There could have been a different direction taken there, but the direction that was taken was that we're going to put this on the plate of police, and that has really largely created many of the aspects of modern policing that we recognize today. And then moving forward through the 20th century, key developments in the Fourth Amendment and search and seizure hinge on the role of cars and driving and vehicle stops. Vehicle stops quickly become the predominant way that Americans directly interact with law enforcement officers. That's the most common way that we interact with police. And then moving, into more recent years, key developments in surveillance technology, location tracking, automated license plate readers, all these types of things reflect the sort of ongoing adjustment of the criminal law and criminal law enforcement to developments resulting from the capacity for travel that automobiles enable.
Yeah, I mean, so let's start there. When the explosion of the car happened at the start of the 20th century, and I didn't realize how bloody this situation was. Like, just Americans getting killed on the streets all the time because there were cars that were getting sold, people were buying them. Maybe you didn't know how to drive them fully, and also our streets were just not equipped to handle it at that point. Take us to that point in history and how that began to shape what you're discussing here.
Sure. Yeah. So, as in lots of situations, the law and law enforcement institutions are really playing catch up to the development of this new technology, which diffused rapidly across the country. And as you indicate, urban infrastructure was simply not equipped to handle cars. Many people who were operating them didn't really know what they were doing. There was, at first, of course, no official licensure, no driving examination required. It was really a free-for-all. And yeah, it was carnage to a large extent on especially urban streets in cities throughout the country as cars rapidly proliferate. One of the statistics that I cite in the book is during the year and a half or so that the United States was involved in World War I, more people died from car collisions in the United States than died fighting overseas.
Wow.
So this, created a real need for a response, and the law enforcement, police departments in various cities did their best, I think, to adapt to the situation. And the legal changes that we see emerging from this time period include things like the creation of jaywalking as a crime. And within a decade or so, we moved from a situation in which the street was much more of a multi-use space, right? At the turn of the 20th century, you would have horse-drawn vehicles and pedestrians and people selling things in the street, children playing in the street. And within about a decade, 15, 20 years, certainly, the street had been legally and socially redefined as a space for automobiles only.
Yeah, I mean, the crime of jaywalking, can you talk a bit about how the car manufacturers had a role in the creation of that designation and making that illegal?
Sure. So Jay, for those who aren't aware, I wasn't before I started doing the research for this book. Jay was a slur. It meant like, an uneducated or unsophisticated person from a rural area. So the creation of this crime of jaywalking, it was a propaganda effort on the part of automobile manufacturers and organizations for motorists like the American Automobile Association to sort of redefine the idea of crossing the street outside of a designated crosswalk or crossing the street not at right angles, to redefine that socially as the act of an unsophisticated person who had no business being in the city, right? So you get this sort of social disparaging aspect that then is quickly formally adopted into the law.
With some backlash too, or with some debate. I mean, I didn't realize that it was considered offensive by certain people when they were debating the adoption of jaywalking laws, but now it's just everywhere.
Certainly, right? So we see this, throughout different things when we get changes in the law, that what was originally contentious and considered objectionable by many people very quickly came to be just taken for granted, right? That's just the way it is. Of course, it only makes sense to cross at designated crosswalks and so forth. And, one of the things I note in the book is like a lot of aspects of the car-centric policing and criminal punishment system, there are major racial disparities in jaywalking now, with African Americans much more likely to be arrested and cited for jaywalking relative to their overall proportion of the population.
Gotcha. And another thing I didn't think about is how Prohibition contributed to this as well. You write about that in, I think, your third chapter. How did Prohibition ramp up this policing becoming indelibly linked to the car, both in the crimes that they're targeting and in the fact that soon enough police forces were highly motorized?
Sure. So prior to Prohibition, there were some laws on the books outlawing certain substances and so on and so forth. But the arrival of Prohibition marked the first time in U.S. history when law enforcement was engaged in a concerted, systematic effort of searching for contraband. This was the first time that the type of activity that seems very familiar to us now was really becoming a major part of the law enforcement enterprise. And the business of bootlegging and rum running and moonshining and all of those fun terms that we associate with the period of Prohibition ran through automobiles, right? That was how the illegal alcohol was being transported for retail sale and so on and so forth. And so police around the country, federal law enforcement and state and local law enforcement operating under color of federal law, found themselves wanting to search all these vehicles. So one of the major legal and social consequences of Prohibition when it comes to this interaction between cars and criminal justice is a 1925 decision called Carroll versus United States that was about warrant requirements for searches. And that decision established what we now know as the quote-unquote automobile exception to search warrant requirements. So at that time, William Howard Taft was Chief Justice of the United States, and he wrote the majority opinion for the court in Carroll, and they reasoned that a law enforcement officer wishing to search a vehicle did not have time to go out and get a warrant because the vehicle could be relocated, right, by the time that warrant would be obtained. Therefore, the court reasoned law enforcement needed to be empowered to make discretionary decisions about when to search. When a search was legally justified and reasonable under the Fourth Amendment. And that's where the probable cause standard in Fourth Amendment jurisprudence really comes into play, where in the Carroll decision, which is still good law for all intents and purposes, in the Carroll decision, the court held that an officer could make a determination of whether there was probable cause to believe that there was evidence of a crime currently occurring or having recently occurred in the vehicle, and if the officer made the determination that there was probable cause to believe that, then that officer was justified to conduct a full inspection of the interior of the vehicle and its occupants without the requirement of obtaining a search warrant. And that is a pivotal Fourth Amendment decision that really sets up a lot of subsequent Fourth Amendment jurisprudence.
Certainly, and then the weakening of the Fourth Amendment is indelibly linked to both, I would say, Prohibition and then the subsequent war on drugs, where there's another loosening of those kinds of requirements. Like if a dog, I remember learning about this case in college, if a drug dog goes to the door of a home and they smell something, what does that mean? Does that constitute a search? Things of that nature, and the fact that this it didn't always need to be this way. Like we could live in a country where you could get pulled over, I guess, for a traffic stop, but that if the officer said they smelled weed on you or something, there was another reality in which that officer would have to obtain a warrant before they searched the car. But that's not how things went down. And the context of Prohibition is so important there because you can see how criminalizing certain substances gives police more powers because of the, stated urgency of stopping the crime in those instances.
Yep, and as you suggest, and as I point out in the book, Prohibition really is a precursor to the war on drugs in many ways, not least of which is the effect that it had on criminal organization. Prohibition functionally created the 20th century mafia in the United States as we know it by creating this huge black market for something for which there was a lot of demand. And there are strong parallels to the country's and the world's experience with the war on drugs and the effect that the robust black market for what are now illegal drugs has had on creating a massive profit stream for criminal organizations.
So I guess we can move past Prohibition, and now we're in the middle of the 20th century. The police officers are now heavily motorized, and cars are central to that. How did that proliferation continue even after Prohibition ended up ending?
Sure. So one of the big developments in the middle of the 20th century that I talk about is suburbanization. So with the sort of daily commuting that automobiles enabled for millions of Americans, we get this massive push to suburbanize, and that comes with the construction of highways that decimate urban neighborhoods, really creates the massive residential racial segregation that comes to characterize the United States, as well as further concentrating urban poverty, and sort of creating these environments that we now associate with some of the most egregious overreaches and abuses in contemporary policing. And then as vehicle patrol becomes the predominant technology of American policing through the middle part of the 20th century, that's when we replace the cop on the beat, if you will, the officer who's walking around a neighborhood directly interacting with residents and so forth, with the cruiser and with the officer that is cruising through the neighborhood, passing through the neighborhood, not building those same types of connections with members of the community. And lots of people, I'm certainly not the only one, lots of people have mentioned or analyzed how this has affected police community relations and helped contribute to the real deterioration of trust between police and their communities.
How did the development of interstate highways during this period also affect policing in this way? Did it federalize a lot of this stuff?
Sure. So automobiles in general, from the the early parts of the 20th century when they began to proliferate, created real sort of jurisdictional issues, because now it was much easier, especially in the more densely populated Northeast, where the states were smaller and state boundaries were closer. It was much easier to move between states, right? To commit a crime in one state and abscond to another, or something along those lines. So this, from the early part of the 20th century, really helped propel what people call the federalization of criminal justice and an expanding role for the federal government. So you get the FBI in the early part of the 20th century, before it was even called the FBI, back when it was called the Bureau of Investigation, enforcing laws like the Dyer Act, which criminalize the interstate transport of stolen vehicles. And that becomes the jurisdictional hook that allows the FBI to get involved in manhunts for John Dillinger and Bonnie and Clyde and these really kind of high-profile outlaws of the era. And as you move forward into the middle part of the 20th century, into the later part of the 20th century, interstate highways sort of supercharge that phenomenon, where especially certain types of crime, the transport of illegal drugs, the illegal transport of human beings, right? These are crimes that are definitionally interjurisdictional in almost every case, creating real issues if a state-level law enforcement agency wants to investigate and potentially help prosecute these types of offenses. And so the federal government really steps in and takes a much more prominent role in criminal justice, and particularly in addressing these types of offenses that are now almost by definition interstate in nature.
And then we get really to the 1970s, and the car is basically essential for people to get from point A to point B. We're building entire communities based on the car. Very little public transportation in terms of the way that many governments are prioritizing new development there. And we're also now seeing the drug war ramp up. what did the 1970s bring to this shift in policing?
Well, the acceleration of the drug war, I think, in the 70s is really a very crucial development. And, we're at this point, and especially once you get into the latter part of the 1970s and into the 1980s, that's when you're really seeing the rise of mass incarceration, right? Which is itself largely a product of the war on drugs and associated enforcement efforts. And this is also the period in the 70s when the federalization of law enforcement really kicks in a major way, in large part as a consequence of the federal government's role in the war on drugs, and this being a federally orchestrated enforcement measure. So beginning in the 70s and into the 80s and the 90s is when we get a lot of these federal omnibus crime bills and so forth that lead to federal criminal law largely duplicating state criminal laws, meaning that any given offense can, in almost every case, potentially be prosecuted either by federal authorities or state authorities. So that's another big development from that period.
Yeah, and then federalizing also the systems that come with that, which are racial profiling, because once these Fourth Amendment standards are dropped, it gives much more officer discretion. And what does officer discretion mean? It means that racist tropes can be replicated and also grafted onto one's supposedly, natural intuition. If you could just talk a bit about that as a replication of some of the racist politics in this country.
Sure. So I think sort of a key precedential point here is Terry versus Ohio, the 1968 Supreme Court decision, which authorized what we might call the pretextual stop or the investigatory stop. So the ability to temporarily detain someone based on quote unquote reasonable suspicion. And that precedent and then subsequent activity deriving therefrom really creates the opportunity for biases, especially along the lines of race and ethnicity, but along other lines as well, to factor heavily into what policing looks like in this country. And by empowering officers to make determinations about who is reasonably suspicious and who isn't, you are creating an environment that is conducive to people acting on the basis of biases, even if those biases, as I think they are in many cases, are unconscious or implicit or unstated. Even if officers, stopping someone to question them and perform kind of mini investigations either on the sidewalk or on the side of the road, even if they're not in any way explicitly or consciously motivated by racial bias, the fact is that there are strong stereotypes around race and criminality and dangerousness that are widespread across the American populace. And those biases, we know from a lot of empirical evidence about vehicle stops as well as pedestrian stops, those biases do tend to have an effect. They do tend to shape who officers see as suspicious, who they see as potentially involved in crime, and therefore who is more likely to experience one of these stops, whether it be a pedestrian stop or a vehicle stop.
I mean, and then we're kind of in the modern era now where we can see how traffic stops lead to disproportionate police violence against Black people. Sandra Bland is an infamous example of somebody who was killed in a jail cell or died in a jail cell after she was arrested because she didn't properly signal when she was changing lanes. And then, there are many more examples of this kind of police brutality. If you don't, if you could just bring that into the conversation.
Sure. So in 1996 is when we get Wren, like the bird but with an H, Wren versus United States, which explicitly extends the basic Terry precedent to the vehicular context, and explicitly in a unanimous decision written by the late Justice Scalia, explicitly says that officers are free to stop vehicles and temporarily detain people for any traffic violation of any kind, even if the purpose of the stop is not to enforce traffic law, even if the purpose of the stop is to conduct a miniature roadside investigation. So with that really formal blessing of this type of activity, yeah, we see an even greater prevalence of what Charles Epp and his colleagues in their book Pulled Over call the investigatory stop. And one of the points that they make very forcefully in that book, which I think is crucial for people to recognize, is that there is a real difference between a stop that is initiated for the purposes of traffic safety and a stop that is initiated for the purposes of one of these little mini roadside investigations, a pretextual stop that is only pretextually motivated by traffic safety. There are no, according to Epp and his colleagues' research and other people who've studied this systematically, there are no significant racial disparities in the rates at which people stop, at which police stop people for traffic safety violations. Those stops appear to be overwhelmingly triggered by people breaking traffic laws, right? Excessive speeding, running red lights, etc. Where all of the overall disparity in rates of vehicle stops by race comes from is the disparity in rates at which people are stopped for these investigatory purposes. So the quote unquote DWB, driving while black phenomenon, is largely explained, if not entirely explained, by differences in who police tend to see as suspicious and differences in who police target for these investigatory vehicle stops. And as you suggest, right, Sandra Bland, Philando Castile, the list goes on and on of people, disproportionately black people and other people of color, who have experienced not only harassment, stops, arrests, criminal charges, but violence and death as a result of these policies.
Yeah, I mean, and then there's the added element of the seizure of people's cars as kind of publicly available property that can be taken in order to get people to pay back certain debts and things like that. That's completely been normalized by our society.
Yeah, so one of the chapters in the book, I attend to this phenomenon of civil asset forfeiture, which maybe you've talked about on your show before. It's gotten some attention, I think, especially recently. But these are laws at the state and federal level that authorize the government to seize and keep people's property based on probable cause, according to their assessment, to believe that that property was somehow involved in criminal activity, even if the person never faces criminal charges, even if they're never prosecuted or convicted of anything. The government can nevertheless seize property, and they do by the hundreds of millions of dollars annually. I connect this to cars in the book because the most common way that one of these civil asset forfeiture actions begins is with a vehicle stop, and a vehicle stop where police find cash or they find something else that leads them to believe that there might be some connection to criminal activity. That can authorize them to seize cash, seize the vehicle, seize other property, and keep it.
Well, this is a fascinating way to look at our history of criminal justice, and an important one. The book is called Rules of the Road, The Automobile and the Transformation of American Criminal Justice. We will put a link to the book wherever you're listening to or watching this, and at majority.fm. Spencer, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Emma. It's a pleasure.
All right. We are going to take a quick break. When we come back, we are going to do one more story before we head into the fun half. Be right back. just one more story for you guys before we head into the fun half, because while, obviously the number one story every single day is what's happening in Gaza, the Republican Party is in a complete, just total mess of a situation that they created for themselves. A reminder for people, the reason that we are here right now and the reason that there is no Speaker of the House, except for obviously the temporary one, McHenry, is because Kevin McCarthy was so power hungry that he, after 15 rounds of voting, did a deal with the devil and said, hey, Matt Gaetz, crazy wing, I will grant this as a part of our agreement that to make me speaker, to crown me king, that you can at any point file a motion to vacate and that you can oust me from my position whenever you so choose, if the vote is successful. And McCarthy wanted to be speaker so badly that he agreed to that. And you know what? Gaetz did it. Gaetz did it. And so the Republican Party is scrambling, trying to find a new Speaker of the House. And we talked about this on the show the other day, and I'm sure Sam did yesterday as well. There are 18 House Republicans who are in Biden districts that Biden won last election cycle, or in 2020, I should say. And they feel very vulnerable right now, as they should, given the amount of negative partisanship that is out there about Republican extremism and chaos, personified by Donald Trump, but also personified by this fight in the House. And they were worried about electing the Trump pick, Jim Jordan, who is extreme and brash and has issues like, many credible accusations of him covering up sexual assault when he was at Ohio State. There are a lot of issues for frontline Republicans on that front from an electoral perspective. So many of them defected. Jim Jordan lost more votes the second round, and there were reports that the more moderate Republicans were staggering their the votes so that it would appear like Jordan was bleeding votes. So he's not even apparently, as of what we see now, right, Bradley, they're not bringing a vote to the floor today at all. They're going to instead shift their focus to empowering the temporary speaker with some more powers so that they can get business done, like sending military aid to Israel and to Ukraine, and then also to Taiwan. These are the things that they want to get done, especially given how dearly the Republican Party loves the Israeli apartheid regime. With all of that context, here is Representative Mike Lawler, who does not support Jim Jordan. Again, Trump endorsed Jim Jordan. The entire Fox establishment does not want, Fox News channel does not want to see the Republican Party to continue to be in this chaos, so they're in favor of Jim Jordan. But Lawler is not, and Fox and Friends is not happy with him. This is them grilling him after the second failed House speakership vote.
To do it. If we can't get those folks in a room with folks like me in swing districts and the folks that are now opposed to Jordan, we're never going to be able to build consensus.
But you're one of the people that are opposed. But we're respectfully, Congressman, the Gaetz thing is past us now. We have a new nominee that's on the floor, and the question is, why aren't you voting for him?
Respectfully, it's not past us, and that's the challenge here. And what I've said to Jim
McCarthy
Jordan,
is no longer a nominee.
What I've said to Jim Jordan from the very start is you have to get the right people in the room so that we can hash this out.
I'm asking about you, though, Congressman, not the right people. You're voting against them.
With all due respect, you can yell at me about it, but with all due respect, if we don't get everybody in the room to hash out the path forward, it doesn't matter who the speaker is, all right? We can elect a new speaker, but we still need 218 votes on the floor to pass our appropriations bills, to deal with aid to Israel, to deal with the crisis in Ukraine, to deal with our border. If we can't compromise within the conference, forget about the Democrats, within the conference, we're not going to be able to govern. And that is the fundamental problem here. So when you had 8 people team up with 208 Democrats to unceremoniously remove Kevin McCarthy without cause, And then they moved to block Steve Scalise because they wanted Jim Jordan. You create a problem within a conference. And what I'm saying is, if you want to fix it, as I told Jim Jordan last week, get everybody in the room that needs to be there and fix it.
Yep.
That's the only way forward.
And don't leave the room until it's fixed.
Yeah, we'll see. There's a vote today.
By the way, we told Jim, stay in the room till you get 217. Don't put it on the floor until you have it.
Agreed.
And he did. He went without it, and we had less votes yesterday than the first round.
It was a gamble, and he lost. All right, thank you so much.
We had it. We. Yeah, I mean, that kind of accurately summarizes it there. They're not happy. They're not happy. And what is Lawler's connection to McCarthy, Bradley? Is he an ally publicly so, or is that just more implied? You're down. It's not. No.
He's a freshman lawmaker, so he's the one who took over Sean Patrick Maloney's seat. So I think partially it's if I had to hazard a guess, a lot of them maybe feel that fealty or did feel that fealty because McCarthy is such a successful and prolific fundraiser.
Right.
And so I think,
and Lawler's in New York 17. He is one of the 18.
So I'm sure there's something to be said that they'd rather there be any sort of discord like this, any sort of kind of capture by the hard right, sort of just completely disadvantages them. So I think the combination of that makes it so that they don't want to have to answer for everything that Speaker Jim Jordan does in, the Hudson Valley.
Or everything that he did, or
everything that he's known for.
So, I mean, exactly, which includes the insurrection. I mean, and that is, I probably should have mentioned that at the top, because I think for guys like Lawler and the rest of those frontline Republicans, that's the thing at the top of their minds. I mean, abortion's going to be on the ballot in 2024, we know. But as it directly relates to their position within the Republican Party and their position on this issue, they're terrified of ads run in blue states about January 6th and Jim Jordan's role in election denial, which is well documented, which there's much video footage of that one can put in an ad in those districts. And they certainly do not want to have that on their record. Now, what's funny is that Jordan's prospects appeared much better a few days ago, and one of the frontline Republicans, Molinaro, voted for him, right, and endorsed him. So that's not, he's probably kicking himself thinking that he got certain assurances from Jordan's camp that they had the votes when they absolutely do not. It is just hilarious to me that they keep trying to, the Republicans feel like when they're behind closed doors that they will get more dissension because people are more likely to speak out against a Trump person in private and Trump's pick than they are in public. And when they have to go up against Trump with a vote, that was their calculation, that we're going to basically pressure people by putting it on the floor and make sure that they are in a position where they either have to go up against the base or go up against their interests in a purplish or bluish district. And that experiment has failed, and people are pissed. And the moderates having that strategy to stagger defections so that it looked like he was bleeding votes. I mean, that's ruthless. Jim Jordan, that's not somebody that they wanted to attach their names to. So I have no idea where this goes from here, but I'm loving it. It's great to see the Republicans in disarray.
If I may, if we could just play one more thing, just to also hammer this point home of why Biden district Republicans would think supporting Jim Jordan is kind of a nuclear option for them. Just listen here. I'll get this up in a second, but just listen here to Tom Cole, the Republican from Oklahoma, touting why he wants Jim Jordan to be speaker. I'm just going to get this video up, so give me 1 second.
Okay, perfect. And this is him on the floor speaking in favor of Jim Jordan. Maybe in this clip he was a little bit too honest, and this is exactly as Bradley says, the reason those Republicans are so terrified.
That's not the root of the problem. But unlike any other speaker we've had, he's had the courage to talk about a long-term plan and to get at the real drivers of debt. And we all know what they are. We all know it's Social Security. We all know it's Medicare. We all know it's Medicaid.
Whoops.
No president of either side has been willing to deal with this. No speaker of either side has been willing to deal with this. My friend, our former colleague, John Delaney, and I offered a plan. I still file it every year. John's not here anymore. To go back and do in 1983 what we did then and address Social Security. We never can get any help. This is the guy that wants to create a debt commission, a bipartisan debt commission, and get at the roots of our spending problem. That takes courage.
This is the guy that wants to cut Social Security and Medicare.
And
it's a shame that you can't use footage from the House floor on the in campaign ads, but you can put quotation marks around what he just said there.
Yeah, I bet Mike Lawler, going back to Hudson Valley, and all the Long Island Republicans would love to be like, hey, that guy you supported, do you really want to cut my Social Security? Do you really want to cut my Medicare? Do you really want to cut my Medicaid? Yeah.
Oh.
Seems like a good vote for them to take.
Yes. Thank you, Republicans. Thank you very much for this self-immolation that you're engaging in. I mean, we'll see. Biden's a historically weak nominee, so we need all the help that we can get in order to make sure that the Republicans do not seize power in 13 months. All right, guys, with that, we're going to wrap up the first hour of this program and head into the fun half, where the number is 646-257-3920. We will take your calls and read your IMs. On ESVN today, Bradley will be giving our pick, and I will be giving our picks against the spread. Competition heating up. We both went 2-1 last week, starting to get our groove back, and it's getting more and more intense. We'll float some of the suggestions that you made about what the punishment will be, because we've got to make a determination based on that. YouTube.com/ESPN show today at 4 p.m. Brandon, hello.
Oh, we don't hear you, Brandon.
Your mic is not working.
My mic was off.
There we go. And now it's
I didn't
on.
realize that. Well, I was just saying it's a pleasure to see you. Look at the fresh cut. I'm smooth all over.
Wow. I mean, you look like a new man. And but you are wearing my favorite shirt of yours, which is the Shining one.
Yes, it is spooky season, so I'd like to represent my spooky fans out there. Spooky for reasons other than, well, I mean, entirely related to Halloween. I don't want to, cast aspersions on my fans.
Can I just say, speaking of spooky season, Criterion Channel has a collection of 90s movies on, and I watched When a Stranger Calls Again. Very good horror movie, which I had missed.
I remember that movie.
Yeah.
God. Oh, whoa.
Hello, Victor.
Whoa.
Wow. Fully supplanted.
Yeah, exactly. That's a creepy movie. Yeah.
What's the movie? I think I heard
When a Stranger Calls Again. I haven't. I don't know
it's a sequel.
Yeah, but like it's funny because you don't need the first one at all for it, and it's really well done. It has I don't know what the lady in Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt's name is.
Ellie Kemper.
She's in it?
No, the one who doesn't want to get gentrified out of.
Carol Kane.
Yeah, she's in it.
I love that woman. But
plays Lillian. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I guess I was thinking of the 2006 remake. That's what I saw.
Oh, that movie is terrible.
Yeah, maybe it's terrible.
Do not get them confused.
What is a 1993 version?
When a Stranger Calls, I think that's like the classic. The call is coming from inside the house, right? Am I wrong about that? That's like the origin of that. Phrase.
The original one, I think, might have been, yeah.
Oh, wow. This remake has 9% on Rotten Tomatoes. What kind of movies was I watching as a kid? Anyway, so Brandon, what's happening on the discourse?
Well, we had an episode out for patrons last week, and we're going to try to get an episode out for the SoundCloud this week. Hopefully we'll be able to address the Israel-Palestine what else can call it, genocide, and also do more updates on the presidential race. Republican primary season is in full swing, and maybe also touch on Trump's many crimes again. Every week new updates.
All right. Binder, what's happening on your many shows?
Sure. YouTube.com/MattBinder and doomedcast.com. Past 2 weeks, basically, there's no other news to really talk about other than, what's going on over in Gaza. So that's what the past two episodes have been about. The 2 weeks ago, really was breaking down everything. And then this past week, sort of focusing on, how to be careful with what you share, because there's a lot of propaganda, disinformation, especially online. On social media like Twitter, aka X.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can check out.
I think that's good. I think it's also not just on social media. I think it's also at, like the BBC.
There's a lot of propaganda.
Oh right, but we can't really do share it. Like we can't just like click a button to repost that.
Right, of course, yes.
Yeah. And Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Left Reckoning. We had 2 nurses from the Robert Wood Johnson nursing strike, which I believe is in day 77. If you're in New Jersey, go on and support that strike. I forget the link. Maybe we'll put it in the thing, but we're going to try to get them on this show too, because they're fighting for safe staffing. Really inspiring to talk to young nurses that saw a little bit of the pre-COVID thing, but have been thrown into a world that is not. Our hospital systems are failing in a massive way, because people have been retiring, so you're losing a lot of institutional knowledge, and you have understaffing to begin with. So even the people who are there haven't been trained as well, and it's all because we have absolutely a psychopathic system that has people looking at these things as sources of profit instead of sources of making sure people get healthy. And so patreon.com/Left Reckoning. It's one of the. It was really nice to do that interview, because there's a whole lot going on now that you don't feel like you can influence, and these are people who are right in our backyards, really standing up against,
Is it Rutgers?
It's a Rutgers affiliated
so
hospital.
down in New Brunswick. Okay.
Yep, New Brunswick.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
Robert Wood Johnson is the hospital.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. All right. Well, check all those shows out. The number again is 646-257-3920. We'll be taking your calls and reading your IMs, and we'll also talk a bit about the hospital bombing a little bit, and some of the new information that's coming out as well. Check us out in the fun half. Bye bye.
You are in for it.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Ceder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Danner.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. See white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them. Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.